Hello and welcome back. You're either watching this on my website or you know me from this channel. And if you don't, my name is Rowan Garlow and I am a trauma recovery practitioner. And somatic experiencing is one of the modalities that I utilize in private session work with my clients. I also use voice dialogue, which is a consciousness process that was created by Helen Sidra Stone. It's absolutely fucking amazing. And I also use inner child work and working with different timelines, which happens also within somatic experiencing. So there's a lot of overlap between these different modalities. I originally recorded this live and I realized I mixed something up in the very beginning, and I really want this information to be absolutely correct and succinct. And the last video was also 35 minutes long, so I want to see if we can do this in under 20 minutes. Let's start off by talking about something that I think is a really important preface to this whole video. The collective human nervous system, has no doubt taken a hit within the last year and a half and has been taking hits for a long time. So while somatic experiencing is something that was created for shock trauma, for PTSD and CPTSD, it's beneficial for everyone. And the reason why it's beneficial for everyone is because I honestly believe that everybody on this planet has trauma. We have all been subjected to familial, societal, global programming, and oftentimes trauma-based mind control, which is something that you're probably not going to hear a ton of people who are explaining what somatic experiencing is talk about. But talking about the larger picture is really important to me, because we have to look at the broth that we have all been steeping in. So the collective human nervous system, especially over the last year and a half, has really taken some hits. And this is on top of all of the just the regular day-to-day stuff that people have been trying to process. So this work is not only incredibly important, but it's almost like we can't afford to not understand how to heal. It's either we heal together and we find tools to regulate and to reconnect and rehabilitate ourselves, or we're watching systemic and organismic breakdown take place. And as I name that, that's part of understanding when the nervous system has been dysregulated for a long time. What we start to see is a physical breakdown within the being. And there's a whole spectrum to this. We can see anything from syndromes cropping up, really extreme levels of organismic breakdown, people not being able to get out of bed, people experiencing high levels of anxiety to the point where they're constantly in fight or flight or constantly in a state of depression. These chronic states are what are causing breakdown. But I want to really stress here that I truly believe that anything that we are calling disease or illness or what looks like a breakdown is preparing us to break through. I know that sounds really corny, but our organism has infinite healing potential. And what we are calling disease is the body's infinite healing potential. And this disease model that we see happening within traditional allopathic conventional medicine is brilliant because it does just that. It capitalizes on this infinite healing potential and it packages the different ways that the organism is trying to get itself to a space of homeostasis and calls that cluster, because the way that the body is coming back to a state of homeostasis is going to be dramatically different for each and every person. There's infinite ways that the body does that. And then we take that, we package it up and we call it this type of disease or this type of illness or chronic fatigue or chronic pain when those are alarm bells within the system that are saying something is off, something has been perhaps chronically off, we need to come back into a state of homeostasis. And oftentimes the body is trying to do that, but we don't have the tools, the knowledge to be able to do that. So my hope is that in sharing about something like somatic experiencing, we can understand just how important it is to just even understand, like, your body's not doing anything that's against you. If you're staying in it, when we talk about breakdown, if your body is constantly keeping you in a state of what we're calling sympathetic and parasympathetic, this is a subsystem of the peripheral nervous system, which most people are familiar with. When they talk about the nervous system, you think of fight or flight, freeze, the gas and the brake. When your system is chronically keeping you in one of those two states, chances are it is for a reason. Your organism, your multi-level and dimensional being, is trying to complete some type of response. So when you come into work with somebody who's a somatic practitioner, and this is, let's say you guys have decided, okay, somatic experiencing is going to be the best tool to use in this situation. They are going to be looking at, why is the organism getting caught in one of those? And not only why, but if we know that it's being caught in there, how can we begin to get you back into a space of coherence and resiliency? That's really what somatic experiencing is. It's about rehabilitating coherence and resiliency within a system. The training to go through and actually be certified as a somatic practitioner is years and years. It takes anywhere from 3 to however many years you want it to take, but at a minimum, it takes around 2.5 or 3 years to complete. So, I could go into all of the clinical side of what it actually, what is a practitioner really looking for, how all the different things that go into the nuances of what we're looking at. But for the sake of this video, I really just want to keep it very simple. We're understanding when a person comes in, what is the pattern and what else is going on? Where is the coherence? Where is the support within the structure? So you may be doing things like resourcing, resourcing to things that have been helpful in regulating your nervous system, resourcing to special objects, animals, events, people, places that are supportive. So we've got, as a traumatized individual, which is every single person in society, you don't get into adulthood without being traumatized because of what is going on at a much larger level within this 3D chessboard. We want to look at what's the natural tendency and what else is going on. So within the traumatized individual, like I said, which is everyone, just to varying degrees, the tendency is to go towards what we're calling the trauma vortex, which keeps pulling us in, right? You might have felt that spiral, whether it's a spiral down, down, down into a deep depression, or a spiral up into a state, a high level of activation, maybe anger, frustration. Either way, feeling an inability to regulate your body, your emotions, the behaviors that are coming out of those biophysiological states. There is a pull for that. And part of creating that resiliency and that coherence is what else is happening. So that sort of acts as the scaffolding. So if you go in to see someone, you might not necessarily go right into the most traumatic thing, right? We see within things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which in my perspective has a pretty strong limit to it, because somebody may be telling a story over and over again, locked in the meaning channel. They may be locked out of other ways of processing that information. And if we're not connecting the dots to the images, the sensations, the emotions, the behavior, we're not getting the full picture. So these resources, this orientation, which can actually be like literal orientation, orienting to our environment, which hopefully is safe in this moment, or at least pieces of safety within the environment that we can link to, acts as the scaffolding or the support structure to be able to safely and in a titrated, meaning in small chunks kind of way, into that trauma vortex. So we may actually be inhibiting that natural desire to go towards the worst part of what we've experienced, which, like I said, can sometimes be the case in cognitive behavioral therapy. Excuse me. And we may actually be wanting to build up the scaffolding so that when we go in, we've got this nice juicy container to hold chunks of processing at an integrative level. So somatic experiencing is really known for pieces. And this word that we're calling pendulation, which is movement between the pull on what is the disorganization and this coherence. Because a healthy system has access to sympathetic and parasympathetic, meaning if we need to be able to run for our lives, we've got to have access to this. And it's important to know that these systems are nuanced. The sympathetic nervous system is not just fight or flight. It's what allows me to sit upright right now and have this conversation with you. The parasympathetic system is not just freeze, which, by the way, is a more activated state than fight or flight. It's rest and digest. A resilient, healthy system needs to have access to both of those as basic survival strategies in extreme situations. However, like I was saying before, the problem comes when those are chronic, stuck states. A naturally healthy, restored system not only regulates itself implicitly, internally, but can flow. And when there's activation or deactivation, where we're going really deep into freeze, has the capacity to come back into that healthy range where we're experiencing what we call the ventral vagal system, which is this safety zone. This is where we feel good in our body, we can be in the body, and we feel safe. Now, on my Patreon, I shared a really another in-depth teaching about the actual nervous system, as well as like 20 plus tips on stimulating what we call the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is part of the parasympathetic, that break, that rest and digest system. Because like I said, remember, there's nuances to it. The vagus nerve runs all the way through our face right here, all the way down into the top portion of our colon. And when we're really young and we're babies, our vagus nerve is not developed. It takes all the way up until like sometimes 12 or 13 before that vagus nerve is not only fully developed, but also myelinated properly. Myelinated just means it has a fatty sheath on it, and that fatty sheath is what allows quick and fast processing. So when we're babies, think about the environment that you were raised in, right? In the beginning, I was talking about this collective broth that we've been seeping in. Think about the broth that was your family system, that your nervous system was being patterned after, because not only are we a relational species, we're a co-regulatory species. So we don't have the ability to internally regulate ourselves yet. We're completely dependent on the nervous systems around us. And I think most people who end up in trauma recovery or make it that far down the road realize that there was, not an ideal set of nervous systems typically that were assisting in your own development. Something that's important to name is that if we've never had a regulatory system, in front of us, like consistently, someone to co-regulate with, right? The way that a baby has to co-regulate, then that's part of the work that you do with a trauma practitioner, is they become the regulatory nervous system in the room or across Zoom, which we're energetic beings. We can feel nervous systems really across time and space. They become that. And that is what we call explicit regulation. So your system starts to, hopefully your practitioner has a regulated nervous system, and you will start to naturally come into more of a state of coherence as you guys are working together. Of course, they're tracking your biophysiological state. They're tracking for self-protective responses. They're looking at channels that you might be locked out of in terms of processing information to bring a more integrated full picture. They're looking at breathing, inhibitory responses, body narrative. There's so many different pieces that your practitioner is going to be observing and then helping you to become aware of, so that you can slow down enough to let these things complete. So eventually that explicit regulation with that other person becomes something that you're able to do naturally. You don't have to think about it from the inside, because both the gastrointestinal, that's the enteric, and your autonomic, which is that sympathetic, that, sort of where I can sit upright, or in extreme cases, fight or flight, as well as the parasympathetic, that rest and digest, or that freeze, they're all involuntary systems, which is why you might notice that if people have had issues with nervous system regulation, they might also have digestive issues, whether that's constipation, diarrhea, IBS, Crohn's, colitis, because your gastro system, your immune system are all affected by your nervous system. And ultimately, we want those involuntary systems to have the ability to regulate themselves. That's good SE work. Good SE work means we have a strong immune system, we have a resilient system, we're coming into greater levels of coherence, strong, I think I said immune system already, digestive, immune, all of that. And not that we're like chronically living in a state of like, neutrality, but that we have access. Remember I was saying that ventral vagal system, that is that safety zone, that's really where we want to be living a lot of our life, because it's a low cost system. It doesn't cost a lot. Being in fight or flight or freeze at those really extreme ends of the spectrum chronically, whether we're, let me finish that thought. Being in that chronically is high cost. It costs a lot to the system. And it's good to note that because of the work of people like Stephen Porges, we understand what we call polyvagal theory, meaning that those systems are all kind of on at the same time, and they are working kind of simultaneously. Some people literally are constantly having the gas and the brake on all the time, at both of them at a very high level. That's when we start to see really big breakdown within the organism. But we, at some level, we kind of, if you were all in brake, you would look dead. You would have no muscle tone. Your heart rate would be zero. Your blood pressure would be so low. Your breathing would be extremely depressed. I had my teacher once say that she's never seen somebody come into her office in all parasympathetic, because they wouldn't even be able to walk in the office. There's some level of vagal tone within the sympathetic that's online to keep a person moving, as well as there's some level of brake on, because if we were all sympathetic, I mean, our heart, we would be fucking pouring sweat, we would just blast off like a rocket. So we have access within that polyvagal system. It's just how much access do we have to that safety zone? And when we go into fight or flight, how long does it take us to come down? When we go into freeze, how long does it take us to sort of thaw out and come back to that space of homeostasis? So I made it in 20 minutes. I'm very proud. Like I said, there's so much nuance to when you go into the office or have a virtual session with somebody. It's something you really have to experience. I mean, somatic experiencing, you really kind of have to experience it firsthand. And it's not just, where do you feel that in your body? You know, it is a really integrative process. And somebody who's well trained in this has a very sort of attuned eye, and their system is also picking up on your system. It's beautiful work. It has so positively impacted my own life and my own health and well-being. I will sort of end by saying that I'm currently off of social media platforms, but I am still working with clients one-on-one. So if this is something that you feel drawn towards, then try it out. It's really nice because it's little chunks at a time that your system can integrate. Not these, you know, we used to think with therapy, it was like good therapy was the 10 tissue session. The bigger the emotion, the bigger the release, the better. And that is just not always the case, because if we have a lot of, let's say we're in freeze, a lot of the time we're locked up, a lot of our energy's been locked up. If we go to just let all that energy go and there's no scaffolding to catch all that energy, and we haven't been building up that capacity, that could be really destabilizing actually. And the same goes for if we're used to living in go, 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 suddenly we have access to this like expanded feeling of like, you know, rest and ease. That could be destabilizing. I mean, it sounds weird, but when you're used to being in one state, the nervous system's like, what? We want to be able to rehabilitate, renegotiate, and reorganize in a way that's actually sustainable. So I hope this is helpful. And again, if this is something that really resonates with you, reach out to me. I have all my links down below for the Patreon, which I have another video about this, as well as a list of 21 things you can do to stimulate that vagus nerve, which is the vagus nerve is associated with that rest and digest. So it's going to help bring you out of that activation. And these are really cool things you can do. I also have links below to my Telegram group, which is spiritual development resources, as well as an addiction recovery group, which I am a part of. I do not host it. Everyone in that space is equal and we share about our experiences with addiction. People are at different stages with that, but it's a beautiful thing. But I would really encourage you, if you're going to do that, please only do it if you're very serious about being accountable and being engaged with that group. So, I will also link my Instagram down below, which also has all of the links in the bio, but I'm going to put them all here. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, wherever you are. And my hope is for all of us to be able to really rehabilitate our true, organic, perpetual life systems so that we can continue to be a pillar of strength. And bring in this pillar of strength, not only for ourselves, for our communities, and for the planetary body and grid, as many of us are being called to do so at this very intense time within this cycle, within the human cycle of evolution. So much love, and I'll see you around.